Two crucial documents on the Rafale deal have been made available in the public domain. One is the Comptroller and Auditor General, that is the CAG's report on the deal that was placed on record on the last day of the 16th Lok Sabha. The other is an 8-page dissent note by 3 members of the negotiating team that clinched the Rafale deal, made public by the Hindu newspaper. Both documents looked at together give a slightly clearer picture into 3 key questions. One, was the Modi government's decision to buy 36 Rafale fighter jets instead of the original 126 justified? Was the latest deal done at a better price? And will these 36 aircrafts be delivered sooner than the earlier deal? Now, you would have heard different answers to these questions depending on who you listen to. The BJP government says the CAG report has vindicated its position. The Congress president prefers to stick to the dissent note published in the Hindu. But what is the true picture? To speak more on this, I'm joined now by Sandeep Bhardwaj, a research associate at the Center for Policy Research. Rasheed Kidwai, visiting fellow at Observer Research Foundation, also joins us today. Welcome to both of you. Mr. Bhardwaj, I want to get your take first on what is the clearer picture emerging. We just have more official information as of today. There's been a lot of stuff spoken about, printed, leaked. But today we have the CAG report in Parliament. Is there a clearer picture emerging?
No, actually there isn't. If the way to read it is, you can read it both ways. You can argue that it helps the opposition's claim, or you can argue that it furthers the government's claim. The fact of the matter is that you can argue both ways, but the issue here is that this is no longer an issue of who can argue it best. It is basically about politics. It is a political question now. For 1 year, till we were talking about this could have been talked about in a way in which government could have settled this issue institutionally, but they failed to do it. Instead of giving a clear picture, they kept on putting out omissions and errors and retractions. And now we are at a position where no single agency can actually give a clean chit which would settle the issue. Even if CAG report had clearly said in clear words that government was right on every point, I don't think that would have settled the issue even then. Actually, the preparation for that...
Yeah, the important thing is that the CAG report has not said that. And, you know, Mr. Kidwai, why don't you come in on this? I'll tell you my reading of the CAG report as well as the dissent note. The CAG report says that the Modi deal, just to call that broadly, the 36 aircraft deal was 2.86% cheaper, and the planes will arrive 1 month faster. The dissent note by 3 members of the Indian negotiating team seems to suggest that the new deal was 5% more expensive and maybe 10 to 14 months slower than what was initially agreed upon by the UPA. It's neither here nor there in terms of the narrative which has been put out, isn't it, Mr. Kidwai?
Yeah, actually, the key point here is that in India, defense deals tend to be extremely sensitive in terms of their the kind of political impact they make. Prime Minister Modi had come in 2014 with a great hype and sense of expectation. The kind of famously he had said that, you know, he will be a chowkidar, because if you remember that in 2014 and before, prior to that, there were some kind of allegations of corruption against UPA government. So in that perception pattern, Dr. Manmohan Singh may have been, you know, the finest gentleman and a very clean politician, but his handling of government left a lot to be desired, and the Congress party paid a heavy price for it. So here the issue is that it's no longer between opposition and the government, or about you know, a kind of cold plank. The very important issue has come that credible newspapers like the Hindu and Indian Express have jumped in, and their reportage is something that is proven to be extremely damaging for government of the day. See, nobody is getting into this whether it was profitable for 5% or, you know, to cheaper by 2.5%. Those issues have become, you know, I mean, they are not politically potent. Politically potent is something is wrong, something is rotten in the state of Denmark, and this perception is something that will cost Prime Minister Modi's personal image as well as, you know, the political outcome of 2019. there will be an impact on those counts. So I think if I was in BJP, I'll be very, very worried and careful.
You know, Mr. Kidwai, I think you have an interesting point, because the narrative has moved from there could be no corruption to was there something wrong, and if it was wrong, was it corruption? There is no clarity yet on whether Rafale is a big poll issue, whether it will hurt the Modi government's image. But do you think it's now gone to a point where it can no longer be brushed off?
Absolutely. I mean, I give great credence to this, the newspaper revelations, because if you understand that the great Indian middle class, which is a very strong and a very vocal supporter of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and to some extent even the BJP, now they are the ones who are getting, worried, and they are every day in the morning, there is a sense of, fear and anxiety that, oh, what has N. Ram written, or what will even Indian Express be saying? Now, this is something as a young reporter, I remember the same thing had happened during Bofor's case. Rajiv Gandhi thought that he was on a very firm wicket, he had a huge mandate, his image was clean, but I just saw it just faded away. Now, in the era of this 24/7 television news and social media and all those things that, that nobody can hide any information, I think this perception that, a single individual or a private industrialist was, benefited from it is something that is going to be really, a crucial thing, a turning point. Remember, in India, the common man, does not have a very high regard of, industrial houses having some kind of, professional or personal rapport with the political establishment.
No, I get the point that, facts seem to recede to the background in a political battle. But again, Mr. Bhardwaj, I do want to come back to some of the facts, because we believe that our viewership and the people who watch us are interested in the facts. So let's go through what the CAG report and this dissent note have revealed. And, I gave the headline sort of thing that there's not too much of a price difference. But yes, it did take an enormous amount of time to sink this deal or to finally stitch it up. I think the other big concern that came out of the CAG report is the fact that even the timeline that has been given to us may not be adhered to, because Dassault Aviation has a huge backlog it's sitting on, which ranges between 8 to 11 years, depending on which of the two reports you read.
Yeah, and also, I mean, CAG is, for example, saying that it is just the timeline, even on paper, has been pushed only by 1 month, as my understanding is. And similarly, the 2.86, it is nothing to 2.86% cheaper. It is nothing to sneeze at, but it is still not a very significant factor. But there is actually, the way to frame it is not to go after particular facts, but see it like this. There are clearly inconsistencies which have been going on because of this saga as it has been developing in the last 1 year. We can see that the government did not have the whole act right. Now, the opposition's point of view here is that there was some sort of malfeasance, and the government's point of view, government's argument here is that there was no malfeasance. What was done was that the system was basically done away with in sake of expediency. Now the point is that I think that the second argument, the government's argument, is actually more problematic. If we are ready to, for the sake of expediency, throw away the safeguards, throw away the rule book, that is when we get into trouble. And I don't think that either side, regardless of what facts or what set of facts you take or how you read these reports, there is nobody who can argue at this point that that wasn't done. So whether it was done for expediency or it was done for some sort of corruption, there is still a problem.
Another point, I think, which is a similar concern raised by the CAG as well as in the dissent note, and this is where there's so many similarities between the dissent note and the CAG, and this question is for Mr. Kidwai, is the question of a sovereign guarantee. And what really did we get by letting that go? The CAG comes to the conclusion that if there was any kind of monetary benefit, it was to Dassault Aviation, not to us. We didn't really get much for it, and maybe it wasn't worth it. And the negotiating team, or the 3 members who have dissented in the Indian negotiating team, also come to the same conclusion.
Yeah, this is again, a very gray area. What is happening is that increasingly CAG reports have become extremely political. The choice of that appointment, that office of CAG has also become extremely political, and opposition is going extra mile to attack that. You see what had happened in 2G. There was this whole, the way that Vinod Roy had built up this whole, this thing about that, that notional loss and all those things. You remember at that time Kapil Sibal had tried very hard to counter. Then it went finally to court of law. But it did become a very big, potent political issue in 2014 general elections. So since then, the government have been, particularly Modi government, has been extremely careful whether it's about who's heading CAG, who's heading CBI, who's heading RBI, all the government institutions. Now this has also become a political football. So in the process, the credibility of this institution, CAG, has also undergone a sea change. I mean, it has taken a huge nosedive. So this is something that's also an area of concern. I think when it comes to credibility of it, people are going to give far more credence to the observation that was made by the expert panel rather than observations of the CAG.
Let me get Manisha Priyam into this discussion. I want to welcome her to the show. Ms. Priyam, thank you for speaking with us here at BloombergQuint. We've been discussing what has really come out of the CAG report. We have that dissent note in front of us because of the Hindu expose, and then the politics over it. The CAG report, as per the government's version, has given them one more victory and vindication. But if you look closely, that may not be the case. Do you think Rafale is now an old issue for the BJP now that the CAG report is finally out?
No, Rafale is not an old issue. If you see, the CAG and the Supreme Court is giving the clean chits to the government on different sets of issues. But those issues that are being brought out on the Hindu, nobody has an answer for those things. So there are more questions coming out than the issues that are being sealed either by the Supreme Court or subsequently by the CAG report. For example, the issue of pricing, nobody knows what has happened there. So from a simple outsider's perspective, the bigger question that remains is as follows. What was the reason why the offset clause or the offset contract went to Anil Ambani? I mean, nobody understands this. So clearly the fact as it is, the whole tenor of argument that is being built by Shri N. Ramji, a journalist and an editor of extraordinary credibility. So I think that question somehow will remain on the common person's mind. And yes, the Supreme Court has closed it in a particular sort of way. A petition was dismissed by the Supreme Court. But, it seems that the issues that were put forward by the government to the Supreme Court were not full and final. The CAG has given a clean chit in one particular sort of way, but the pricing issue is not dealt with. And neither the CAG nor the Supreme Court adequately answer the question as to why some partner has been preferred over another. So yes, there are a whole lot of issues that are not answered either by the Supreme Court or the CAG, and there are questions that remain, and those questions are sovereign.
But is it really a clean chit? Is it really a clean chit? Because if you look at the report in a detailed manner, the government has been making claims of a saving on the Rafale deal from 9% to 20%, in some cases even more. And the CAG report talks about a 2.8% saving, not taking into account what would have happened if he'd asked for a sovereign guarantee, which the CAG says we should have. Maybe, Ms. Priyam, Rahul Gandhi has been a little foolhardy in dismissing the CAG report before it was even out. In a sense, it raises a lot of uncomfortable questions from very serious quarters.
So, Mr. Rahul Gandhi is raising questions on his own. I don't quite understand what he's trying to say. I think the most important issues are being raised by the Hindu newspaper, and most of the debate and discussion is veering around the issues that are being brought out by N. Ram. Those issues are clearly not in the public domain. For example, N. Ram has been able to put to us that the Indian negotiating team was sidelined by the PMO, and whether that should have happened under the procedures or not. I mean, those questions are squarely leading to a certain direction. Rahul Gandhi is simply, once again iterating whatever is already out in the public domain by way of this. So clearly, and the Hindus' arguments, if you see, are coming one after the other. And today, in fact, it's come with matching notes from the concerned officials. So those questions remain. And as far as the CAG report is concerned, Clearly, the issue of sovereign guarantee, I haven't read the CAG report as of now, but clearly the issue of sovereign guarantees, if it's being brought out by the CAG report, then it would be a pertinent question to ask. But in a certain sense, the CAG giving the clean chit that this has been a savings affected by so much, I mean, those are discussions that can go on. And the CAG figures can be put to dispute. The government will, of course, always use the CAG report saying, oh, it's confirming the beliefs that we already have or the claims that we've already made. But if there are issues of gaps in procedure between the Indian and the French negotiations, or the way the government of India dealt with this whole matter, and if it has been brought out in the CAG report, those issues should also be taken up by political parties. And you are correct there that the CAG report should not be dismissed in a hurry.
No, there are massive issues. There are massive issues, in fact, and I've got Mr. Bhardwaj back, who's looked at some portions of that CAG report. You know, the prices have all been redacted, and the CAG puts on record in its very first para that they were not happy with this. They wrote back saying that they must, put out all the prices in the public domain. It's unprecedented that they've been asked to redact the prices of how much was negotiated, how much was finally agreed on. But then they had to, go with the government's point of view eventually. It's not as simple as it seems, is it, Mr. Bhardwaj? Perhaps the CAG report needs to be looked at in more detail.
Yeah, I mean, CAG report certainly. For example, even the idea of that the reason, so the 4 enhancements, for example, which were not required by the technical and staff evaluations, which were included. Nevertheless, those kind of factors which always come in. But as we are seeing the debate progress, right, this is how it is turning out to be, because the issue of sovereign guarantee, for example, it turned first it became about the problem of how France was how Dassault was given this kind of a special treatment. Then there was another statement which came out that we do the similar thing with Russia and US. And if you look at CAG report today, one of the points that it makes very clearly is that with US and with Russia, we are dealing with governments there. Here we are dealing with a private company, and the way the contract has been set up is that we first have to go through arbitration instead of going directly to the government. So we won't be dealing directly with the French government, but first we'll have to go through this arbitration process. It's clearly not very favorable to India. But once again, these are all very legal issues, and we'll keep getting more and more detail. The problem is that it cannot be analyzed from outside because of so much secrecy, not just about this deal, but overall the defense acquisition process. So the outside public, even within the government, people don't really know what is going on.
No, I agree, people don't know. But, to assume that no one will understand, so then let's not get into the details and just talk about who's saying what, I think is unfair to a lot of Indians who want to know and want to make informed decisions, which is why I'm keen to go into the details. In fact, the point that you're making, Sandeep, about, some India-specific enhancements could have been dropped. The dissent note in the Hindu also makes the same point, as does the CAG. And the reason why they were India-specific requirements is because the whole process in the beginning was incorrect. There were other bidders who were willing to give us those requirements, but we were insistent on Dassault. That's why they said, okay, we'll do them for you, but we'll charge you more. There's a lot of detail in there which needs to be gotten into. But Mr. Kidwai, let me come to the point about the perception battle. Do you think that the Modi government is losing the perception battle on it, and will it really harm them enough as the opposition hopes, considering that the real issues still remain unemployment and rural distress?
See, in India, no elections are single issue-driven elections. So every issue has a kind of contributing role in the outcome of elections. What is happening that I have a slight disagreement with Manisha ji on this count, that Mr. Rahul Gandhi has actually, done a very remarkable, sustained battle on this count. He went on talking about Rafale when there were very few takers, when people were not willing. They thought it's just a kind of rhetoric and Rahul is just trying to get even with Modi. But now you see the newspapers coming in, credible editors jumping in, and every day there is a revelation, and people are comparing what was it like in UPA deal in 2007 and now. Why was that, the place of arbitration changed? Why was this, the sovereign guarantee was, who was Government of India trying to favor? And these are the issues that become extremely political. And as I said, that involvement of an industrial house and all that further complicate. So I think Mr. Modi will have a lot of explaining. Now, thing is that he's putting his personal prestige. The fact of the matter is, this is a high-cost game. What happens if it boomerangs? Then it will not be just a defense deal where people didn't handle it well or something like that. But it will be seen as somebody who is holding a very responsible position, a person who was so much trusted, and there is some kind of breach of trust. That will have a huge political repercussions. So I think we have to wait the outcome of elections. But the way you see the media and opposition have come together, I think this is extremely significant in the context of campaign points.
Ms. Priyam, do you think the Rafale issue has reached a boiling point in a political sense? Do you think the Modi government's losing the perception battle, or will it just sound like babble to voters who are maybe more concerned over everyday issues?
No, I mean, voters are concerned about everyday issues, but remember, Rafale, if the whole expose, as is being brought out by the Hindu, reaches a crescendo, and it reaches a crescendo with more and more political parties raising it, then it will become an issue. I mean, there will be ground issues like farmers' distress or unemployment, but remember, these became big issues in the elections in Chhattisgarh and Madhya Pradesh. Defense is not really an issue of state-level elections, but defense expenditure is an issue in national elections. So in the month to come, we can't really undermine the fact that if the crescendo reaches with newspaper exposes, more and more facts being brought out in the public domain, more and more arguments. For example, if tomorrow's op-eds contain a lot on the CAG report, if it has been seen through, and then we can never underestimate the power of this whole thing. And remember, Rahul Gandhi is raising this, but the fact is that the full debate, as it has been brought out by NRAM and the Hindu, is coming from a non-political perspective. So the voter is not likely to suspect that it's coming for certain political motivations. It's coming because defense is the largest expenditure made in our budgets. This is public money, this is public interest, and in public interest, journalists, newspapers have a public duty to bring this out. And if this is brought out in this manner, then in the days to come, there will be many more parties raising this. Remember also that there has been a battle in the Supreme Court which was led by Yashwant Sinha and Prashant Bhushan and Arun Shourie. Yeah. Now, if these exposes reach a certain direction, it will be very difficult for the courts also, if the documents are that much more credible, if there are, officials are, official notings as Hindu is bringing it out, it will become that much more indefensible to defend the position of the government as it stands now. So just saying the Supreme Court gave us a clean chit and the CAG gave us a clean chit, if the documents come out in certain other direction, it will become more and more untenable. And we don't at this point know whether Rafale could become a big matter or not. But if the present momentum continues, be sure that the national elections would be gripped by this issue.
There is a review petition pending in the Supreme Court right now to its earlier judgment, which ruled out a probe into the Rafale deal. We've definitely not heard the last of the deal. But what is the true picture? Is it the government's version? Is it the opposition version? Well, as they say, the truth usually lies somewhere in the middle. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us on the debate today.